I don't see a microphone, so
That's
I won't
it.
use it.
Sorry, I cooked it.
That's okay, that's okay. I'm going to tell you about a hero. But first, for context, what I'd like to do is show you some photographs from 5 different action-packed movies. And the reason is that these movies and the actors in it and the characters that they play are kind of typical of the different kinds of heroes that we are kind of used to, especially in film. So here's Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, and he fights all kind of bad guys with sword or machetes here we see, and guns, and his trusty bullwhip, all for the purpose of trying to keep priceless religious icons out of the hands of the bad guys. Here's Charlton Heston in an old film who was playing the role of an astronaut who clearly landed on the wrong planet. He spends all of his time trying to overcome that situation. Then you've got the macho type of hero, and here Russell Crowe is playing the role of a general who has been cheated out of his job, basically, and now he's thrust into the Colosseum to fight hungry tigers. So lots of action there. This is the sort of the anti-hero. This guy is quite familiar, and in this role he is an over-the-hill, one-eyed drunk cowboy who gets hired by a little girl to go find her daddy's killer. Well, bad guys beware. The bottle's empty and he's in a really bad mood. The last hero doesn't have anybody to save but himself. Tom Hanks in Castaway, some poor guy that is for years marooned on an uninhabited island. Well, the characters that these fellows play do bold, dangerous things to overcome the enemies and the obstacles that are in their way. And we get to see those, especially if we go to a movie to see these kind of things. We see their heroic acts on big, colorful screen with background music and sharp focus, and all the sound effects just add to the experience. That's the way Hollywood does it. And that's one way we kind of get used to seeing these dramatic acts of heroism. Meanwhile, as we all know, in the real world, heroes don't get rehearsal. There's no stuntman to do the really dangerous parts. In the real world, dangerous, heroic acts sometimes occur quietly, with no warning, in obscure places where very few people know that it even happened. The story I want to tell is of just such an incident that I witnessed in 1965, and it took place in less than 4 seconds. Back then, gas was 30 cents a gallon. I was a sophomore in high school, and to the point of this story, I was on the gymnastics team. At that time, I didn't really know anything about the coach of the gymnastics team. He was just kind of a small stature guy named Gaylord Hughes. To us, he was just Coach Hughes, and he was kind of a quiet-spoken, seemed to be self-disciplined kind of guy. What I found out through some research is that Gay, or Gaylord, went by Gay. Gay was born in 1926, and after high school, it was the beginning of World War II, and he became an instructor in hand-to-hand combat and survival swimming. After the war, he attended the Illinois University, and he became a gymnast. And he became such a good gymnast on the trampoline that by 1948 he was the NCAA national champion, the best of the best. After college, Gay began a 35-year career teaching physical education, driver education, and coaching gymnastic teams, first at Arlington High School, then at Forest View High School, both in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. During his career, he must have earned the respect of his peers because at one time he was the president of the Illinois High School Gymnastic Coaches Association. Well, during my years at the gymnastics team, we rarely won any event, largely because Forest View High School, where I was a new high school, and Coach Hughes was still building the gymnastics program. But we did have one guy that was really good. His name was Bill, and I've never been able to remember his last name, but he was shorter than Coach Hughes and a real stout, solid guy. And he was a magician on the trampoline. And it's not surprising that he did really well on the trampoline. He had the natural ability, but he also had the coach who was a past national champion. So he had a lot of advantage there. Well, that afternoon in 1965, Bill was practicing some new moves on the trampoline. Coach Hughes was nearby giving instruction and encouragement. I was nearby also doing something completely unremarkable on the rings, which is the event that I've competed in. And it was just the three of us in a room that we called the pit. And that's because it was a relatively small room for what we're doing in there, but it had a very high ceiling, which was needed to do trampoline work because a really good gymnast on the trampoline goes really high, 15 to 20 feet above the surface of the trampoline. And the longer the gymnast is in the air, the more time he has for the flips and spins that score points in competition. Well, Bill was doing his magic, and I took a break from my practicing, and I just stopped to kind of watch it all. And then something went very, very wrong. As Bill was rocketing up into the air, it was very obvious he was not going straight up. He was on such a trajectory that he was probably going to come down perhaps on the edge of the steel frame that surrounds the trampoline and supports it. And probably coming off of that, he would be onto the concrete floor 3 feet below it. Fortunately, Coach Hughes was on the same side of the trampoline to where Bill was going to be coming down. Bill finished the last flip of what he was practicing, and as always, looked down, as any trampoline guy would do, look down to get oriented, prepare your mind for the next thing that you're going to do. Well, he looked down and instantly knew that he was headed for a body-wrecking crash. Coach Hughes looked up, estimated accurately, very accurately, where he was going to come down, and in the same tiny amount of time, this whole thing is happening in less than 4 seconds. Coach Hughes goes over, grabs the inside edge of the trampoline frame. And you can't move the trampoline. It's very, very heavy. He grabs that, he looks up at Bill, leans back, pushes his chest up, and pulls his head back as far as he can. Bill looked down, and at the same tiny fraction, so time must have slowed down for these guys. Looked down, saw what Coach Hughes was doing, and knew what Coach wanted him to do. And that is to come down feet first and land on and essentially stomp on his chest hard enough to be thrown through the air onto his back onto the trampoline. that was being the plan. Think for a moment the physical risks to Coach Hughes. Depending on where Bill smashed into him, the potential injuries included shattered collarbones, broken ribs, if you hit him low enough, just terribly ruptured organs. Add to that, and I'm not a physician, but add to that, what does that do to your spine to get slammed just in one spot where the rest of your body is not being slammed? I don't think that Coach Hughes gave a thought to any of that. His only objective was to hang on to that frame and save his student. Bill is now coming down. This happened so fast that neither one of them said a word. And I'm sure I was speechless just watching what was taking place. Bill came down like a 140-pound rock thrown out of a second-story window. He slammed into coach's chest, and perfectly flew off of his chest onto his back, uninjured, on the soft bed of the trampoline. Somehow, Coach Hughes hung on to that during the impact. He still had a hold of it, and Bill was laying on the trampoline. I never heard if he got injured. If he did, I never heard about it, and he was in the gym the next day. It seems reasonable to me that if that man would risk so much in an instant, it's likely that he did a lot of other heroic acts during his 79 years on this earth. So, in his 3.5 decades of, I don't know, something I'm going to say, he did all of those things, took all those risks, and there's no movie, The Gay Hughes Story. And I doubt that there were any banquets or dinners to honor him for bravery during some crisis. But he was the real thing. He was the no hesitation, risk it all hero that all of those actors try so hard to portray. In his 3.5 decades of teaching and coaching, the number of students that that benefited from Gay Hughes is literally in the thousands. I was certainly one of them. And I am still impressed with how much that man could teach about values, commitment, and sacrifice in less than 4 seconds. Well done, folks.